views, but there could be like intersubjectivity or agreement within subjective views, and there could be disagreement. And so it could be the case that morality is subjective, and people just agree with particular moral statements. Like example on how like agreement could still be subjective, right? Like just imagine you and me are on an island by ourselves, right? We're the only people there, and you punch me in the face, and I'm like, hey, servant, man, I don't like that. Like I punch you in the face, and you're like, Jim, I don't like that either. So like it doesn't feel cool. And we both agree, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't just like punch each other. That's going to be based on kind of like our feelings of not liking being punched in the face, right? Now, let's say right here, and the host and disciple John and James join us on the island, and we all agree, right, based on our feelings that like, yeah, we don't like being punched in the face, right? Now multiply that by like 8 million people in the world, and everybody says, yeah, we don't like that either, right? We could all agree that everybody has the agreement that they don't like to be punched in the face or something, but that's all based on our stances, right? That's all subjective. So nothing about that scenario makes getting punched in the face like objectively wrong, right? That's all based on how we felt about being punched in the face.
Oh yeah, okay, right, yeah. So if there is no God, there is no afterlife. Even if somebody doesn't like something, I have no reason to do what anybody else feels like they don't want to be, done against them, right? Like if there is no afterlife, right, we just all turn to fertilizer one day. Why don't I just go do whatever I want to get the most amount of pleasure that I want, and disregard everything that everybody else has to say about whatever I want to do, whether it be hurting people or whatnot. So I guess that's kind of what it comes down to, is if there is no afterlife and we all just turn to fertilizer, why don't we all just do whatever we want to do to get the most amount of pleasure of the short 70 or 80 years that we have on Earth, and then, just turn fertilizer?
I mean, maybe one reason, like, I'll be quiet because I'm in a noisy place, and somebody else could jump in. But maybe one reason we don't do that is because, well, we live in a society and we see that it's beneficial that we work together as opposed to just doing whatever we want, right? Because that's kind of ensuring us surviving and kind of like getting the things that we want in a society.
Yeah, but one is to, touch people against their will or unalive people, right? Like why don't they just do that and just call it a day? You're gonna turn to fertilizer anyways. Do whatever gives you the biggest dopamine rush, which tends to be drugs or some sort of exciting stuff where your life isn't worth it or whatnot. But typically drugs and harming people tends to drop the most amount of dopamine. So why don't you just do whatever you can to get the biggest dopamine drop, pump that you can, and then just turn the fertilizer after 7 weeks.
James, you can jump in here.
Yeah, James, if you'd like to jump in, you can. Hi, David.
Hi, God bless.
Sorry, I'm to unmute myself.
Yeah, go ahead, James. You wanted to say something?
All right. What I'm seeing that servant is trying to convey is that no matter what a person does, he has value in the eyes of God. He's not. I think that is what he's trying to convey. Would you like to jump in on that?
Yeah. No, the actions of somebody doesn't determine their value.
Well, that is true and false. Because if you don't put yourself in the eyes of God, you will be turned to hell. And that.
Well, yeah, but we also have to remember in, what is it, the book of, I think it's 1 Peter, where it tells us that after Jesus died on the cross, he went to hell and he preached to the people in hell, so that they may be judged like how the men living in flesh are judged, right? So even those that are turned over to their sins, like it's they were turned over to their sins because they were deceived, right? So we're still to give them value as anybody else, and to still treat them, in a way that at the end of the day, the opposite treatment was given to them, and that is what started the deception from the devil to begin with.
Well, what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that you can escape the will of God by not following what He wants you to do and not believing in Him. And you can stray away from what He wants you to do and do these false things that will make you end up going to hell and your punishment.
Yeah.
Like as a child molester, as you guys were saying,
his
rights are still wrong in the eyes of God because he didn't look to God to fix himself, nor did he repent for his sins.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
We're all going to hell.
Silence. Stop.
Hey, servant. Real quick.
Yeah.
Do you know what utilitarianism is?
Give me a brief overview.
So utilitarianism is the belief that it's like a moral system where if it provides utility, it's good, and if it detracts from utility, it's bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure. Slavery has built the biggest civilizations in history and the most strongest civilizations in history. Why is it that you're going to sit here and say that slavery is wrong? If utilitarian-wise, it's built the biggest, strongest society.
Wait, no. Wait, so servant, I'm just trying to draw an analogy to between utilitarianism and subjective morality, such that you might be able to understand the objection. So I assume if you don't know what utilitarianism is, you don't know what the repugnant conclusion is. Is that right?
Well, I did know what utilitarianism, but no, I don't know what the...
So
you cut out, but I don't know what that other word is.
There's no need to call him repugnant.
Yeah. So the repugnant conclusion is supposed to be a reductio for utilitarianism, and it's supposed to say, like, given world A, where a person lives a perfectly happy life, and world B, where two people live lives that are 90% worth living, a utilitarian is going to be committed to saying that B is the best world because it provides the most utility. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just like, let's say you LARP as a utilitarian and tell me which one is the best view, okay? World 1, a 95% worth living life. World 2, 3 lives that are 80% worth living. Which one is the better world morally if you're a utilitarian?
I mean, it would tend to be leaning towards world B.
Yep.
But we don't get 3 lives.
No. I'm not making any corollary there. I'm just saying, like, okay, you just LARPed as a utilitarian, and you got the moral answer correct, right?
But that's with the conclusion that there is more time in life. That's with the conclusion that there are 3 lives. When you dumb it down to 1 life, you don't get 3 different lives to live at 80%.
Okay, then you're exactly right. Let me make another scenario then. World 1, 1 person living a 95% worth living life. World 2, 1 person living a 20% worth living life. Which one is better under a utilitarian's worldview?
So World 1 has 1 person that lives in a good life.
Yep.
And World 90%, and then the second world has 1 person that lives in 20% worth living.
Yep. Which one do you think provides the most utility?
The world A.
Okay. So just like right there when you were LARPing as a utilitarian, and you're saying what makes something moral is what provides the most utility. Now let's try a subjectivist worldview, okay? Let's say that world number 1, right? Somebody thinks that I don't know. What do you think is bad? The unjustified chewing of brains on an infant or something, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so they think that that is wrong, right? And then world B, somebody thinks that that is correct. If instead of utility here, the truth maker is just going to be the preference of the utterer, are those worlds going to be one better, one worse, or equal?
I mean,
What, just to clarify really quick, in world A, the person says, "I find myself with this preference to chew on babies, and that's why I think it is morally good." And then in world B, the person says, "I find myself to have a preference against people chewing on babies. That's why it's morally bad." Do you think that these worlds are one is better than the other from a subjectivist worldview, or are they equal?
yeah. Well, I guess I'd also say that. So, like my, after being, by the grace of God, my definition of utilitarian is different. Using the earthly, definition of utilitarianism, like, yes, it's going to be the eating babies earth that gives a more earthly utilitarianism effect.
Okay, so do you see right there how it was really easy for you to put yourself in the mindset of utilitarianism and get the answer right? But when I asked you to think about it from a subjectivist point of view, there was some dissonance going on there. You wanted to revert back to talking about God and objective morals and what utility really means for the earth and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing that we run into is that, like, the definitions of the earth have been.
Oh wait. First question, real quick.
Yeah.
What is the standard by which you decide which one is actually the correct answer?
Oh, we're not talking about which one's correct. We're just talking about the fact that there are two different systems, and Servant is having trouble understanding the difference in one of them. What?
But you're saying he's making an You're saying objectively he's making the correct answer.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Like how?
he's giving the correct answer using a utilitarian's definition of the word good and bad. And then when I asked him to do the same with a subjectivist view of good and bad, he wanted to revert back to using terms like objectively good and God and the grounding for the earth and all that stuff.
Well, wouldn't it be like, because you're saying let's put ourselves in the mindset of like a subjectivist, right? And you have world A, where someone desires to eat baby brains, right? World B, someone desires not to do that, right? Well, under the subjectivist view, it would be like, what would be the better world, right? Well, that would be indexed to the person.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm saying that the right answer for this subjectivist would be that both.
They think a world a world in which they eat baby brains would be the better world from the subjectivist. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that under the subjectivist framework, in this hypothetical, both worlds would be equally good.
Yeah, sorry. So I used the godly definition of utilitarianism for the first answer. The first answer using the worldly definition of, because God's answer of utilitarianism, right, is that love will change people and people is what matters, and that is what we strive for is for to help.
Wait, maybe this will clear it up then. What's God's definition of subjectivism?
God's definition of subjectivism?
Yeah, if God has a definition of utilitarianism, that's a way more like fringe view than subjectivism.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that God doesn't have a definition of subjectivism, because that question in and of itself is a contradiction, because the idea of God is that a law or value has been given before a mind before human decided what was right and wrong. So to even say what is God's definition of subjectivism, it's a contradicting question.
Okay, so wait, I am confused though. Why hasn't that been your claim this whole time? You've been acting like some people are making morally incorrect statements. If you think that subjectivism entails a contradiction, why haven't you just been saying that? And also, if you think that a mind before humanity, wait 1 second, I'm almost done. If you think that a mind before humanity made the definition of objective, wouldn't that just be mind dependent, aka subjective, as standardly used in literature?
And to a degree, technically, it could be subjective to the point of God has defined the morals.
And really quick question: when you use subjective there, does that entail a contradiction, or are you using some different version?
Well, no, because subjective kind of, like humans can change their right. I guess
If it's rooted in God, it can't be subjective. What is this argumentation?
Yeah, I'm saying that subjective equals dependent on a mind.
They're subjective. Yeah. So the reason why it is subjective is what? No, yes, I understand that. I'm saying in terms of like human morals can be subjective because they can change, right? That's the point. So if God,
as the mind, decided what is good and bad, isn't that subjective?
Yes, and I understand.
If by subjective I just mean dependent on a mind.
I understand God's law. God has set an objective morality that cannot change, right? So that in and of itself is not subjective because, like, yes, technically the way you want to look at it, it could be construed as subjective until you realize that it does not change, which makes it a moral absolute.
You said subjective is a contradiction?
There can be change. Yes, because
okay, what is
morals can change.
What is the proposition and its negation under subjectivism?
Yeah, we're gonna have to define terms because I think both of you are using subjective differently.
Yeah, I'm saying subjective equals mind dependent. I'm saying God is a mind, therefore morality from either of our perspective will be subjective.
Okay, so
servant, you already see where I'm coming from, because you say I could see how you want to say it's subjective, but you're not factoring this thing in. But from your worldview, subjectivism entails a contradiction.
No, in my worldview, subjective means that there is more than one, I guess, air quotes, correct morality, but that would then register all correct subjective moralities moot, because it would be, again, indexed to the specific person. There is no defining absolute of everybody knows on earth that one specific thing is wrong.
Can I ask you two questions?
This issue with subjectivity, and you cannot sit here and say for sure that the thing is wrong if said morality is indexed to a single person.
Yeah.
Then if that single person says that it's okay to unalive somebody, they're not wrong.
But
wait, 1 second.
Brother, is
1
it
second.
being objective when you don't use your feelings in your own thought?
Yes. So and again,
servant, really quick.
This issue where the idea that you're trying to use of God comparing to subjective God has set an absolute moral, a moral absolute that does not change. It cannot be subjective because it does not change. Human morality can change, as we've seen by people that think that it's okay to unalive people, but yet us, bystanders watching, know that that's not wrong. So why is it that us watching are able to say, hey, that's wrong, whereas if it was subjective, we would just have to agree and say, yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, they're not wrong because it's indexed to them and they thought it was okay.
Servant,
I think I get what you're saying, Servant, and I think I could actually agree. I think I know where you would go if you continue to expound on that, so I think I could agree with that.
Yeah, Servant, can I ask you two questions before we continue? Maybe this is a good stopping point, but maybe we could keep going. I don't know. What makes something...
I do. I'm going to get off in a second here, but...
Okay, yeah, my two questions. What makes something... What makes moral statements true under utilitarianism?
At the end of the day, there can be no moral statements that are true in utilitarianism because Utilitarianism just means to do whatever it is to provide the best utility to people, but there has to be a defining person that has defined what is best for said society.
Okay, then my question, I guess I'll rephrase. If you're a utilitarian, what makes moral statements true for you?
Well,
Let's just agree that they're confused. They don't know the Lord. They're confused. They're deranged. Whatever. If you're a utilitarian, what makes moral statements true to you?
Yeah, well, I'm not a utilitarian.
I know that you're not. Let's say I am. What makes moral statements true for me?
Well, that's the thing, is they're not, because you're basing
true or false.
What better serves?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're making.
What better serves? Hold on. Under a utilitarian view, right? What better serves the end, right?
Yeah.
They pursue would
Greatest well-being, right?
Or utility or some kind of rule utilitarianism. Yes, but what makes
the greatest utility? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, servant, if I'm a utilitarian, what's going to make a moral statement true is that it provides a net positive utility over a net negative utility. And then I'm not very hopeful for the second question because of how that first question went, but my second question was just going to be, if I'm a subjectivist, what makes moral statements true? This is a test of your ability to put yourself in other worldviews, like an internal critique or something.
Yeah. So the thing with the utilitarian is,
I'm on subjectivism now.
Well, okay, but you didn't let me fully address the
Sure, go ahead.
utilitarian answer. So, at what standard is being defined by what is best for people? Like, where does that stand?
Hold on, that's like, we're not arguing that, right? Like, we're just merely asking from, like, different perspectives within virtue ethics.
Yeah.
So all he's saying, like, under the subjectivist view, right, what makes a moral statement true, right, would be thus their preferences or desires.
Yeah, observers' attitudes.
Yeah, so like servant, we could cook up a kooky conspiracy theory moral code in a lab called like starburstism or something, where if it produces red starburst, it's good. That's what makes it true when we say that, right? So robbing a convenience store would be good because it has the ability to bring about red starburst, whereas like, schmurdering isn't good because that's all that subjectivism is saying. It's what makes the moral claims true is the opinion or the preference of the utterer.
Yeah, and see,
so
that's what is.
You're going about it. Is it?
You're cutting out, David.
That's
right here. What if the observers were society, and society decided the baby eating brain things was okay? Would you say that was good then?
I would say it was not good, but that's only because when I say it's not good, it's indexed to my preferences as the utterer. I would disagree.
But saying that it's not good is defining an objective moral.
Look,
you may not agree with it, but you cannot say that it's wrong.
Yeah, like Jim.
Yeah,
Like, that's
so
not-
servant, do you think that stomping on babies is good?
No.
Okay, what if everyone in the galaxy disagreed with you? Would you still have that feeling?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
so
the definition of objective morality.
No. Would you say that what makes it true? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that like Jim sort of went over this with you in the sense that like when you were talking about the objective, right, and then you're talking to someone who might be a subjectivist,
Yeah.
right? Nothing like it's trivially true, right? That it wouldn't make it objectively like moral, right? Under a subjectivist view, it would still be a subjective moral, but it's just trivially true, right? That like when you're using objective in the sense, all you're really saying is that hold on, sorry,
I have a preference for it or something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, so I mean what I'm saying is that if you say something is not right or that something is right, that in and of itself is a statement of moral objectivity. If you are a relativist, you cannot say that something is right nor is it wrong. You can say that you disagree with it.
Yeah, but do you agree that like utilitarianism exists and threshold deontology exists and like I don't know, the what is it, the like, don't impose the involuntary imposition of will, like those positions exist, and those all try to answer the question of what does it mean for a moral statement to be true or false.
I would believe that utilitarianism is real. I haven't really looked into.
Okay, but to believe that utilitarianism is real is to say that morality is not objective, because there exist at least two systems, gods and utilitarians, that can operate and make truth claims about morality.
No, I believe that utilitarianism has actually corrupted people and devalued people, and I believe that the earthly utilitarianism has contradicted God. But I do also think that it is being practiced, especially in the U.S., where we see that people are getting paid not a whole lot of money, and people are barely being able to survive. But who is thriving, right? The ones that have declared what utilitarianism should be.
Look, it's just right. So do you agree that, like, let's go back to starburstism, right? Do you agree that, like, I don't know, like, putting somebody underwater for 10 hours without letting them breathe, would that be moral or immoral under our starburst morality code?
Under your starburst morality code, it would be immoral.
Yeah, right. Why?
Because it doesn't bring about red starburst.
Right. And the because there is important. Why do I think that holding people underwater for 10 hours without letting them breathe is wrong? That's not what's important. Because I have a preference against people unaliving by my hand or something. That's what's important.
Yeah, but again, if it's relative, you cannot definitively say whether something is right or wrong.
Yeah, but Jim tried to address this also. Do you think that the phrase "pizza tastes good" can be true or false?
I mean, yeah, that's a relative opinion. Yes.
Okay. Just like what if like 2 + 2 = 4?
Morals are also relative opinions in the world of relativity. And
yeah.
You cannot implement any sort of law like the starburstism.
Yeah.
Because it's all relative. If I believe not to believe in starburstism, I can do whatever I want, and I'm not incorrect.
Yeah, but all we're saying is that if somebody is a relativist, for you to look at them and say you're incorrect about your preference is to say that somebody who thinks pizza tastes good is incorrect about thinking pizza tastes good. It's just a non-starter if your goal is to change their mind.
Well, no, and this is the point that I guess I'm not making the point well enough or something, is that relativism of morals is like the destruction of moral absolute. Oh my God. So just because you agree that something is right or wrong, you cannot definitively say that is right or wrong. So you have to look at the story of the Mustache Man and, Stalin and all these other people, and you cannot say they are wrong.
Yes, you can.
No.
Look, servant, I'll show you in your own words how you can. I'll show you in your own words. Listen, servant. Remember when you said if everybody in the galaxy thought that stomping babies was good, you would still think it was bad?
Uh-huh.
If everybody agreed Mustache Man was good, you could still think he was bad, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm done with this guy. Somebody else can have a turn.
But it's an objective stance. Like I don't know what you're getting about this. Is that if you define...
You said you couldn't say he was wrong, and then you said you could say he was wrong. That's a contradiction. I'm done with this guy. Somebody else can go.
No, I'm saying the issue here
is that servant just thinks that morality means stance independent or objective, which is strange in its own right, but it's also strange because his morality isn't that.
There just isn't a universal standard.
Right or wrong is a moral absolute. So if it is relative, you have to remove the moral absolute of right and wrong.
So remember like an hour ago, like before I took my kid to get a haircut, Just Jim asked you what begging the question was? Like, do you know what that is?
What begging the question was?
Yeah, I think I was about to go inside. I took off my headset, my earbuds. Did
begging
you
the question, internal critique.
refresh me what he was talking about.
Begging the question is when, like, you say something that someone would only accept if they already agree with what you're saying. So when you say, well, it's not morality because it's not objective, well, like, a person who disagrees with that would just ignore what you said there. But you need to give a reason why morality can't be understood as an anti-realist understands it. Just saying, well, if it's not objective, then it's not morality is just a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah, and again, that's, like, that's where I explained we're all made in the image of God, right? So, and again, this is the issue that we run into, is that without the idea of being made in the image of God, right, there is no reason that we should give each other value no matter what, right? Because if there is a God, if there is a creator, and we were made in his image, why in the world would it be okay?
Well, you're actually making that a little harder on yourself, because now you have to substantiate God first to defend the realist position. Usually realists want to get away from defending God and use more of a secular argument for realism.
Yeah, except for at the end of the
Also, when you say there's no reason to value human life or something, no reason there just means that you just don't have a good imagination or something. I can think of many reasons to value life.
No, again, if you say something is right or wrong, that is an objective moral. And if there is no God and we're all just going to turn to fertilizer, why should I not do whatever I can do to get the most amount of dopamine dumps and rushes in my brain while I'm on Earth until I just go and turn to fertilizer one day? Like, why shouldn't I do that, even if that includes devaluing or harming other people?
I think you're understanding the question wrong, because when we get to the point of meta-ethics, it's already assuming that we hold a normative view, and it's just saying, where does that come from? So it's not going back and saying, well, like, I should do whatever I want to. It's saying, like, we'll say we agree with the same normative view, and then it's just the question of where do we get that view? And you're not really giving an answer for that.
Oh, okay, and this is where I've asked, where do you get your view? You've said it's relative, and then gone on to tell me that you can define what is right and wrong. But if it's relative is literally the removal of an objective morality.
Yes, but if we were trying to fight for an objective morality, that would be a checkmate. But we're just trying to get you to understand the concept. What makes something right or wrong in a moral sense under an anti-realist view or a subjectivist view is the stance of the mind of the utterer.
Again, so it's subjective. Which again...
So why is subjective morality wrong?
Can I jump in here real quick?
Why is it subjectively wrong? Because there are people
Hold on. Go ahead, Jen.
Maybe I could get the point across if we just, like, let's, for sake of argument, replace moral statements with, like, culinary statements, right? And go back to our pizza example. So it seems as if, though, when I say, or when you say something like, pizza is good, right? Can I turn around and ask you, well, is pizza objectively good for you? What would your answer be?
I don't know how we're relating pizza to, unaliving people. But I mean, yes, pizza.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to get you to understand concepts of value statements, right? Value statements, yeah.
It is not objectively good.
Okay, so then if it's not objectively good, can I just tell you then, well, then you have no grounds in being able to make any kind of values on pizza, right? You can't, because it's not objectively good, therefore you cannot say that pizza is good.
Okay, but can you also tell me
all the atrocities where people will put pineapple on pizza?
Can you answer that?
Stay on that point for a second, guys.
Can you answer that? Would it follow then that if pizza is not objectively good, therefore you cannot make statements like pizza is good?
Yeah, well, I mean that we all know that the flavor of pizza you like is a relative opinion, right? Nobody's arguing that pizza is some sort of objective standard. But instead, what I'm asking,
but do you have grounds? Hold on. Do you have grounds then to say that pizza is good? And I don't know, burgers are bad. Can you say that? Like,
I mean, yeah.
why can't you say that?
Yeah, because that's my opinion. Which again,
but here's an argument. Yeah, but pizza is not objectively good. Because pizza is not objectively good, you can't make statements like pizza is good. Does that follow?
I get what you're saying, but you're trying to like conflate eating pizza to like unaliving somebody, or like morals where people have done absolute atrocities.
No, like what I'm trying to do is elucidate how we talk about valuing things, right? These are value statements. Remember, when we're talking about value, we typically use language like good and bad, right? So when I make a value statement about pizza, I'm saying that I value pizza, therefore it's a good thing. The same way that when I make a moral proposition like I devalue murder, what I'm saying is that murder is bad, right? And so what I'm trying to elucidate is that we can make moral propositions regardless of whether there's some kind of like objectivity to it, right? The same way that you can make culinary propositions regardless of whether there's some type of objective culinary standard.
Okay, so when you tell someone that, say, pepperoni pizza is good, right, are you thinking in your head, right, that everybody else that does not eat pepperoni pizza is wrong? I mean, no, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, like, what I'm thinking is that people that say pepperoni pizza is horrible, I'm gonna think that they're wrong.
Yes, because it's again, it's an opinion on eating food, right? Like, if again, we have this issue where everybody universally says unaliving people is not okay, right? We have to. What is going on to where universally people are saying that it's not okay to unalive people?
Wait,
Like,
you
where
think
does this
all
source come
people agree with that in all contexts?
I said most people on Earth, yes, are going to agree with that.
Most people agree that ice cream is good.
Yeah, that's a weaker claim, so I won't push back on that. But
Okay, again, we have this issue where if you say something is right or you say something is wrong, that is a moral absolute. You cannot compare that to pizza because pizza does not affect the lives of people.
yeah, but what if
Right.
somebody was doing something morally atrocious, like putting pineapple on it?
Are you making a gastronomic absolute statement when you say pizza is good?
There we go, gastronomy.
No, I'm not making a gastronomic absolute statement because
Why? Like, look, both of these are going to be seen as value statements, right? Both of these are going to be statements of things that we value. In one, we're valuing some type of like, gastronomy, right? On the other one, we're valuing some type of action, right? But we're still making value statements. So for you to say like, look, when I say pizza is good, you're making an absolute gastronomic statement is ridiculous, right? The same way that if I say, murder is bad, that in no way implies that I'm making some type of absolute moral statement.
Okay, so again, the question that has not been answered this entire time: why should I not go and do whatever I want to get the biggest dopamine dump, whether that be include touching people against their will, unaliving people, doing whatever I want? If I'm just going to turn to fertilizer, why should I not do said things to get the biggest dopamine dump that I can for the next 70 years?
Hey, does believing in a God stop you from doing any of those bad things?
Well, the answer is that it violates your normative ethical system.
Yeah.
Regardless if it's subjective or
Okay, so again, you didn't answer the question.
Servant. Does believing in a God keep you from doing those things?
It helps.
Okay, then keep believing in a God.
Okay, but again, you're not answering my question.
If everybody in the world took the same actions that you just said, would the world be better or worse?
It would be worse.
That's why people don't do it. Bingo. Welcome to subjective morality.
So again, you just explained objective morality.
No, I explained popular morality. Popular morality.
There could even be cases where it ends up being negative for you because society would reject you. Then you end up having less pleasure. So stuff like that.
Yeah, but I don't care. I'm just turning into fertilizer anyways. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, then you should keep your God
So
beliefs
why don't-
because it
So
seems
then
like
you
it's
should
very
be
pivotal for you being a good
ostracized.
person.
Like,
That's just consequential.
again, it's good
that
for
can be understood like as objective or
It would make
subjective.
the
At that
world
point,
worse.
if your goal is to have the highest amount of dopamine, once you've been ostracized from society, you're no longer getting that goal anymore. Then you'll change your views.
You can get plenty of dopamine dumps without society.
Prove it.
Okay.
But again, you said that the world would be worse off. Okay.
No,
well,
no,
what
I
does-
didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. You did. You did. You did.
Yes, and you. Am I incorrect?
Did you
agree?
even understand Jim's point there? That's what I really want to know.
Yes, I understand it, but you're not getting to the point to where Wright just agreed that the world would be worse off. Am I incorrect?
You're
Or
not
do you think-
incorrect, but you're incorrect in your summarization of it. You said I was talking about objective morality. I was talking about popular morality.
Okay, so you agree the world would be worse off.
Yep.
Why does it matter if we're going to turn to fertilizer? What does
Yeah.
it matter if the world's going to be worse off?
Yeah,
Why
because
do I
you could value a world that wasn't worse off. That's why.
Like, this is like
based on
completely
what?
irrelevant.
What's up, poopheads?
Again, what is that based off of? What is this?
Hopefully you're at least going to value the things that are occurring as you're here.
It's based on my preferences as the utterer of the moral statement.
What he's saying is completely irrelevant to like anti-realism or realism because like
Maybe you can try here.
Okay.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Sarah. You're saying like consequentialism is going to be able to be objectively framed or subjectively framed as well, right?
that was earlier, but now he's saying, well, look, like you're just gonna like return to like like fish food or worm food if moral realism is false. Like it could be the case that anti-realism is true and God will punish you whether or not you follow that anti-realist like normative framework.
True.
It's just irrelevant to the
Actually,
question.
yeah, servant.
Wait, is he saying something like something like consequentialism or some normative ethical view has to be?
He's saying objectivism is true.
What,
And if it weren't for God, then morality wouldn't exist. Basically, that we just do whatever because we go back to the dust, and who cares?
what do you mean by objective morality? What does that mean?
Not the standard way, for sure.
Well, that doesn't help me. What do you mean by the term?
Objective morality is everybody knows at the end of the day what is right and wrong. Even if a culture says that slavery is okay, there's very few, if any, people that are going to look at that on the news and be like, oh yeah, that's all right, because it's all relative. It's their opinion.
That universal, like, okay, so look, everybody could have propositional attitudes that are universally, like, the same, right? So, imagine that, like,
Where does that
hold on.
come from?
No, but, okay, that's separate question. So, first off, first thing is, imagine there's a world and it's just me and Starfish in it. And me and Starfish, like, push each other, and we're like, yeah, he's like, or I'm sorry, I don't want to misgender you, but Starfish goes, hey, I don't like that. And I go, okay, well, they push me back, and I go, I don't like that, right? We come to this, like, agreement to not push each other, and we enter another person in the world, like Megs or yourself, and the same thing occurs. We push them, and we push them back, and we all come to this agreement that, like, hey, we don't like that, so we just all agree. And just enter a person into this world until you get to the amount of people today. It's compatible with my position as a moral anti-realist that we all, like, index to the moral facts, we all agree, right? We, like, the same way that everybody in the world thinks that chocolate ice cream tastes good. That doesn't mean that objectively chocolate ice cream tastes good, right? It's not like it's incompatible with gastronomical anti-realism. This idea that there are objectively tasty foods and objectively non-tasty foods. Right, it's perfectly compatible with that view that gastronomical anti-realism is true, but everybody thinks that chocolate ice cream tastes good, right? So you're not really saying anything that's incompatible with any of the anti-realist view. If you want to make some view that it's like universally or it's some ad populum, like most people accept it, because you could just do the same thing with other values.
Okay, and this is the issue that I continue running into here. So if there is no God, right, and objectives are relative, that means that nobody is objectively wrong.
Wait, hold on. What's the argument that because God doesn't exist, that morals are relative? That doesn't follow.
Well, and this is because if there is no God, we all turn to fertilizer. Why should I not do whatever
And
I
if
can
there
do?
is a God, we all turn to fertilizer.
That doesn't look.
Why?
You're not actually like so how much of like meta ethical?
I am because you're gonna be unwilling to.
You don't even know what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
What was I gonna say?
Well, I don't know what you were gonna say, but actually,
Then don't interrupt me and let me finish the statement. The statement is that you're not familiar with the like vast meta-ethical literature from atheists that are moral realists. Now, I'm not a moral realist, and I'm an atheist, right? So, like, yeah, I don't think that there are objective morals, but it doesn't follow from the fact that God does not exist that therefore morals are relative, or that therefore anti-realism is true, right? That doesn't follow at all, right? So if you have some argument rather than just some story, right? I don't care about fucking, some guy on the internet story about how like he thinks, he thinks that, in his limited experience, not reading any of the philosophical literature on moral realism, that if you don't have God, that you can't have objective morality, because that's just insulting to like people that have done dissertations on their view, right? It's just insulting.
Okay, but an objective is a set law. Where in time did humans ever set an objective morality? And we run into this issue.
I think you're confused.
We run into this issue to where you're not going to be willing to sit here and tell me, right, if all we're going to do is turn to fertilizer after 80 years, you're not willing.
That doesn't even follow from the fact that God doesn't exist. Doesn't make someone go, now I can't think that there's an afterlife, right? Like, I think, hold on, stop. Have you ever seen the show Supernatural?
No, I've never watched it.
So it's a really good show. Everyone should watch it. It's a great show. You could literally think that all of the stuff in that show with angels and demons are occurring, but there's no God. Like, there just happens to be angels. There just happens to be demons. They happen to be in this war with each other. But, like, they've just been in this eternal war with each other forever. There's never been a creator that started any of this, right? You could have these views where not only do you have angels and demons and you're an atheist, they're not in the same context of an angel as a Christian, obviously. But you could also have views where, like, there's an afterlife and be an atheist. Like, God, you're very confused on what you think, like, believing in God or not believing in God allows you to also believe, right? You're very confused. And by the way, we haven't even gotten to this yet. Your view is, and I guarantee you, your view is going to be inherently some type of subjective meta-ethical thesis. You're not even going to have an objective meta-ethical thesis.
Yeah, he conceded to that already.
Okay, well, then they did all that work for me.
So, okay. So then, if everything is subjective and we're all going to turn to fertilizer, I would like everybody in here to say.
What's that argument? I'm not understanding why that's the case. Like, you're just
if there is no God, we're gonna die.
Wait, servant. Do you understand? Do you understand how after JMike talks for like 5 minutes and then you say something about fertilizer and then he goes on to like elucidate his point and then it's your turn and you just say something about fertilizer? Do you see how you're not listening to like understand the difference of opinion?
I understand. You guys are not addressing the source.
Just steelman JMike's position then.
That would be great.
I'm not gonna steal, man.
Yeah, you're not because you're unable to. Also,
it would be nice though if you appreciated my points, because like maybe my points are stupid, but it would be nice to know if you appreciate what I'm saying.
Yes, I'm trying to address that. I get what you're saying.
Let me just I really appreciate what Wright is saying, right? Like, could you do your best job at like just characterizing what I'm saying? Could you do that? Like, I'm not trying to be like your dad. I just legitimately want to know if you know what I'm like. We're having a conversation, right? Like, if me and you were in real life and I told you to do this, I don't feel like there would be as much hesitance. I think the hesitance is a lot easier because we're not in front of each other. But like, come on, dude. As a human to human, can you just try to appreciate what I'm saying? And what I'm asking you by that is, could you try to relay back what you think I'm saying to you? If not, it's perfectly fine.
I understand what you're saying with like the meta ethics, and we have this thing where we've evolved somehow to be more peaceful because we've heard other people have heard us, and we've just
kind of any of these words that you're saying. I didn't say anything about peaceful.
Yeah, or evolution.
My point is about entailments. My point is about entailments that you're making. You think you come from different propositions, like God not existing, like moral realism not being true, or like that there's no afterlife, we become fertilized. Like you make these really weird leaps that just aren't entailed by the proposition God doesn't exist, right? That's
okay. So if God doesn't. Okay, so I have a question. If God doesn't exist, what happens to us after we die?
That is.
You
just
see how you just kind of brought up fertilizer again without saying fertilizer?
No, because he's saying that I'm making giant leaps of claim.
Look.
So I'm asking then, what happens to us if there is no God after we die?
Look, nothing happens to us. Now what?
Yeah, like what turn? Yeah, what turn?
What turns on that being true or false? Like look, you're very creative at finding ways to re-say the prompt, but if you would just try to listen.
The question: what happens to us after we die? Then we turn to fertilizer.
Let's grant him what Wright's saying. Let's just say we turn to fertilizer. Now what?
That's what I'm genuinely asking. Is that your belief? If there is no God,
okay. Look, I have a question, servant.
I'm not some type of physicalist, so yeah, it's just the case that like when you die, and that's
servant.
Soul death permanent. But I don't understand what turns on that.
Let's say, look, servant. 1 second. Let's say it's true that when we die, we turn to fertilizer. Are you saying that if that's true, objective morality cannot be true?
Yeah, right? Like, it's so weird.
No, I'm saying that there's no...
If you're not saying that, why ask the question?
Exactly. Fucking exactly.
Wait, so objective morality is true?
Are you going to let me answer, or is everybody just going to keep shotgunning at
If you answer, then yes.
No, you answer. That's my bad. I'm just like right.
I understand what you're...
Thanks, JMike. Big fan.
But you cannot give me an objective source, an objective, some sort of source or reasoning why human life matters. Do you want me to prove why human life matters? Okay, I will prove it.
We don't.
No, I would like for the people that do not believe that there's an afterlife or God or anything to say.
I want you to repeat back what Wright's question was, because I can tell you if you don't remember.
Okay, no, I wasn't listening to him because I was talking. My point is that if everything's
then let me reiterate what the issue is, right? If you're not saying something to the effect that look, when you die, you become fertilizer. You just go into the ground. I'm sorry, I apologize. Unalive. You go into the ground and become fertilizer. If you're not saying something to the effect that the conjunction of that, right, that plus objective morality, can't be true.
Is impossible.
Or is impossible, right? If you're not saying something like that, it's not clear why you would even ask that question. It's not like, it just seems like a big time waster. Now, let me ask right before I go. Was that a fair steel man of what you were saying?
That was perfect. Probably too much philosophy language.
Well.
It was great.
So we have two people that fucking agree. So I'm not understanding, it's not like an issue on your view. We're not saying your view's false. We just genuinely don't understand what it seems like you have some what you want to do is peacock. You want to show your feathers at people.
In fact, it's because we want to understand that we're thinking of these questions to push the dialectic further. It's exactly because we want to know what you're saying that we're asking questions that we don't understand when you say something like, when we unalive, we're fertilizer. And we go, why would he say something like that? Maybe I can ask him something like this. It's because we're trying to understand.
Precisely. And even if I accepted that view, it's I go, what turns on that? And you go, and then rightfully asks you, okay, well, look, you're not saying that that's incompatible with moral realism. No. Okay, then why the hell ask that question? It's it's not even clear why the fertilizer. It just sounds like a stall tactic on what was.
What I'm saying is that if there is no God, and the because if there is no God, there is no afterlife.
If there is no God, moral realism is compatible with the fact that there is no God. What now?
True.
There's no contradiction.
Yes, that's I didn't disagree with that.
If you
What I
don't
said-
disagree, then you are incorrect.
No,
You're committed to disagreeing. It's entailed that you disagree by your position.
No, you're not listening to me. What I'm saying is you cannot provide a solid foundational source of the morality.
Yeah, I'll do it right. I'll do it right now. I'll do it right. I'll do it right now. I'll do it right. I'll do it right now.
Right
I'll do
here,
it
right now.
I'll do it right. I'll do it right now. I'll do it right now.
You've
Hey,
explained.
servant. Servant, I'm not an atheist, and you're driving me crazy about the fertilizer statement. Just because people, that's a case where you don't have an afterlife doesn't mean you can't have more realistic values. I'm a theist, but atheists can have they can believe in moral facts that are true, that are brute facts, or they can tie them to Platonic virtues. So there are ways to get there. Now, you can argue that grounded in God's mind, even though it's subjective, is a morally perfect mind and it's better than Platonic values, but you're just incorrect when you keep saying this thing about fertilizer when JMike's trying to get you to understand you can be an atheist and be a moral realist too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just Google
understand.
atheism, objective morality.
Thank you, Truth. Let me just really quick add. Let me real quick add that the important thing, and I think Truth would agree with me on this, is like, at least some people might disagree. Assuming we pass the contradictions and consistency test, and we understand the language that we're both using, now what we do is like compare the views and just like decide what view we think is like, theoretically more virtuous or something like that, or like maybe someone has an argument for their view or something like that, or an argument that the other person's view is false, and then that shows that at least that person's view is false. That's what we can do. But like making these weird, like if you just make this view that you can't have that objective morality without God, or now it sounds like you're not saying that, or whatever you're saying, what's required of you to do, because maybe you're right. Maybe me and Truth go, oh, hey, you know what? We had that conversation with this guy and he made this really good point. But the only way that you're going to make us go, he made a really good point, is by providing some type of argument, right? And for someone like me, I'm going to want to be rigorous about it. I'm going to want you to like give me premises, or like, if it's an evidential claim,
inferential.
I have been interrupted multiple times in trying to.
No, that's fair. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So at the end of the day, we run into this issue to where again, if there is no God, right? There's no afterlife. We run into the issue where personally, there are very few, if any, people on Earth that are unwilling to say, right, that human life is not valuable. Right, because if there is no God, we were not made purposefully, right? If it was evolution, all we are is this random, construction of cells that just happened over time.
That's false. I have to cut you off right there. Right, it's not a dichotomy, because look, I'm trying to help you, and like there are theists that I'm friends with that won't dissent to what you're saying. This isn't like an atheist tribal thing versus theist tribal thing, because like the most like intelligent theists I know are going to also agree with me on this, that there isn't this dichotomy of God or randomness, right? That's not a dichotomy. It's not God or everything's chance or randomness. Now, maybe by like chance or random, you have some different terminology. And when I've gone under the hood with theists about this, who don't like engage in, philosophy or, these kind of debates and stuff like that, which is not, I'm not shaming somebody for that. What they seem to mean is like desired or intended, right? There's like this lack of intent or something, but like that's trivial. If you just mean like that view, if it's not intended, it's non-intended. Well, yes, like that's that would be a dichotomy, and that's great. But typically, like people are saying, like they legitimately think that it's like God or randomness. But just imagine a causally determined world where everything is determined. Right, it's always existed. There's a primary antecedent for every moment, or there's a beginning to the universe, like someone like Graham Oppy's view, and from that moment, there's a subsequent moment, and there's like some antecedent that determines why that next event occurs. And I just spilled apple juice. That kind of sucks. There was some causal determined reason of my foot hitting that, and that's why I spilled apple juice on my new shag carpet. It kind of sucks, but anyway. But you could have that view, no God, and it just be causally determined. So that's just like a weird move to make.
And wait, and servant, there's also like we're being like easy, because there's also the problem that you run into where if you don't have access to the reasons that guide God's conduct, you're just going to have to admit that he could have a morally sufficient reason, an objectively true, morally sufficient reason for you to be deceived about what you think is right or wrong. Like that, and we're not even touching that yet.
Okay. Again, we're running into this issue to where there's nobody in here that is going to be willing to say that human life does not have value.
Yeah, no, I will. I think that all human life doesn't have the same value in all contexts, for sure, and I think everyone would agree with me, right? Even
if we granted like we could just grant him that, who cares? Like everybody agrees.
That's true.
That, but, like,
he tried to sidetrack me, and I fell for it.
It's just the universal like acceptance of some proposition, some moral proposition, is what I came in here at the beginning, at the outset, and said, look, it's perfectly compatible with a view where every person in the world accepts some moral proposition. Like, here's a better way to say it. It's perfectly compatible with every person agrees that some moral proposition is true, when in fact, moral realism is true, and they all get the moral proposition false, right? They're all just mistaken.
True.
That's compatible. It's perfectly compatible that everybody is just totally mistaken about what the moral fact actually is. And then also, it's compatible on the view that just everybody has a universal agreement on the propositional attitude, but moral realism is false, right? That anti-realism is true, some form of anti-realism is true, and people just happen to all agree. So there's nothing that turns on like just saying like, oh, but no one's going to disagree on this thing. Like, I can just grant that to you. I can, like, another way to put this, I can give you your toys to play with, and it's still not going to help you, right? It's still going to, like, if you think that's a way to get out of it, then what you need to contest is the stipulations that I gave you, right? I gave you two. One, that moral realism is true, but everybody universally agrees with the wrong moral proposition, right? And then the other case, moral anti-realism is true, and everybody universally agrees on moral propositions, right? And those two cases seem perfectly compatible, so I don't see the problem.
Okay, so I didn't say that to give everybody on Earth the same value. I said people in here are unwilling to say that human life has no value, right? Because again, even if we're made by even if it's this caused by something or other, right? It's still caused by something. Sure. So what is this something that caused it? But again, we run into the issue of if we're just a species that just happened out of chaos to be made and happened to live life on Earth, and we're all just going to turn to fertilizer one day, and this chaos is going to remake us in another way, millions of years down the road. There's no reason why I should value anybody else over my.
That doesn't follow. That doesn't like exactly. That doesn't follow in any way. And like also like I'd argued a different view. Like, I mean, I don't want to get into like a different rhetoric because this is gonna like take us off of our own point. But like, I actually just like totally disagree with you. I think expiration provides value, right? Because like, look, the fact that like. What the fuck point of me saying bye to my cat or my dog or telling my girlfriend that I love them? Why would I do that? Or my parents, right? When I go see them, and they live like 30 to 40 minutes from me, and so who knows? Maybe I only have 12 more times with my dad, right? Exactly. Real quick, right? But look, value exists within that because of some finite time. Like I have limited time. The same reason why I have to take care of my brakes, because they're going to end up in some landfill at some point, right? If it was just the case that it would always persist, I wouldn't just even bother saying I love you to my dog or my cat when I left, right? What the hell point would even be the point of like, I don't even know why I would call somebody and they'd be like, hey, call. It's like, dude, I'll just call you in like a million years from now. Like that's like a blip on the radar, right? Like it seems to just not provide any value, but that's a separate point that I don't even really care to get into. So like I just disagree independently from that.
Okay,
right?
So But I mean, if value is based off of expiration, that would mean that
It's not. I'm not saying it's based off expiration. I'm just saying, look, you have alternative views to compete with, and someone can be a realist, right? So this is what I wanted to say to you earlier. 2 + 2 = 4 is necessarily true, regardless of if humans exist. Someone could hold this view, right? They could go, hey, there's no God. I think 2 + 2 = 4 exists, no matter if humans exist or whatever. And someone can go, well, like, what makes that proposition true? And all they really have to do is go, well, look, it's necessarily true. It's true in all possible worlds. It couldn't be false. But there aren't objects. There aren't like real numbers. Like, I'm not a Platonist. I don't think there's abstract objects. So I don't need objectivity for there to be objectivity, right? I don't need objects for there to be objectivity, right? So you can have this notion of objectivity about like mathematical or arithmetical expressions. Nonetheless, you don't commit yourself to numbers existing, right? So you're an anti-realist about numbers, but it's necessarily true that 2 + 2 = 4. And someone could just no, I'm not a moral realist. This is my best attempt to help them. Is they could make a similar move and just go, look, necessarily torturing babies for fun is a proposition, a moral proposition that's false, right? Or saying torturing babies for fun is morally right, is a false proposition, or that it's wrong is a true proposition. They could just say that's true, but you don't need like truth makers or something to make it true in the world. It's just necessarily true, right? Now, there's nothing in that view.
Why would it be necessarily true?
This is going to be stipulated in their story. They're going to have to argue for like theoretical virtues on why it would be better to posit that necessary kind of moral fact. But I don't agree with that view. This is why I don't hold the view. If I thought it was theoretically more virtuous to hold the view, then I would. But I'm an anti-realist, so I can't really help them here, right? But what I can say is that, like, me not understanding moral realism, because I think it's gibberish when I talk to people about this, me being like, oh, it's gibberish, doesn't preclude it being a position. That could just be my, like, incredulity, or, like, my just not being able to understand a view, or, like, the semantics that somebody's saying, which is, like, common. I don't understand a lot of times that somebody's saying stuff to me. So it could just be my fault, because I genuinely hold the position that I think the, like, realists that I talk to who hold the stance-independent moral facts, they're just speaking gibberish to me. Now, maybe I'm just confused about that, and there is some position. But the point is that holding to stance-independent moral facts, if we can best construe that as propositional, seems to be compatible with theism as it seems to be compatible with atheism. But if we can make sense of that view, I don't see why atheism or theism would preclude it. If you ask me about my actual specific view, I don't even think that moral realism is propositional. I don't even think that you can make sense of that. I'm just trying my best to like take myself out of my own view and like go to bat for an atheist that's a moral realist.
So I never said that a moral atheist is not possible. What I'm saying is, without a prior set objective morality, there is no standard for morals. So you may say
what does that mean?
Morally good person.
What does that mean?
Well,
Standard.
okay. So because you can be an atheist and you can be a morally good person, right? But if there is no set moral there is no set objective moral before the human mind, the human mind, what that's telling us is that, sure, great, you're a morally good person, but there is no actual standard.
That doesn't make it okay. So look, let's just take your view. We have an alien that plants us here. Like they construct DNA and they put it on the planet, and they construct these like moral properties in the world or something like that, right? So that's compatible with what you're saying, right? So it doesn't no God needed, right? Natural moral realism is true and atheism is true. There's no God, but there's like some I don't know, like really highly intelligent alien being that like develops constructs the moral properties or something like that, or figures them out and then just like plots them in there, right? And that gets you everything that you want. There's moral facts, and then there's a mind that has to like put it into the world or put it into humans. Right? You were very specific.
I mean, yeah, there can be morally good atheists. Like I know many atheists that are morally good people.
It's not that. It's just that you
Yeah,
made like a
that's-
sloppy move where you were like, "There's a mind before humans," but you could have aliens that are before human minds, right? Like, I don't know what's special about humans in life. I forget that.
Or like Dr. Truth was saying, they could be platonic objects that hold like the moral relevance. Like you're not understanding.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the issue that we run into is
that is true. Like that's why I went with the view that I'm saying is that here's a view that denies some type of Platonism, but nonetheless, the moral facts are necessary, and so you have some type of objectivity, but you don't have objects, and that's why I was using the mathematical example. Is that you have mathematical like anti-realism or like anti-realism about numbers, but you have like it's like necessarily true that 2 + 2 = 4, right? So there's like this objectivity, but you don't need right, you don't need objects that like exist independent of that, and that would just be the same thing that you have like an atheist could just like look, it's just necessarily true that this moral proposition is the case, but I don't need like truth makers or something to make that proposition true, right? The same way that like I don't need 2 existing and 4 existing in order to make 2 + 2 = 4 true proposition.
Hey, let me just I'm just gonna interject real quick. If I brought Ryan up here, I didn't know if he wanted to say something about this. He said he had like 2 arguments or anything, and maybe he can just elucidate.
Sure. I mean, Ryan, do you understand the issue that he's trying to express, that like the incompatibility of realism? Like I'm an anti-realist, but
yeah,
I don't even understand realism, but I'm trying to be my best to
yeah, no. Like I think you did good, but there's like a couple other things like floating in the background. So 2 things what I was thinking was like that might help Servant out, and then I had this third like clarification about truth makers being different than realism. So let me start with like Servant. So like I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So there's a couple different issues you could have at play here. So say you got like a moral realism, and there really are these moral facts out there in the world. One question that could pop up is, if God does not exist and did not design creatures with the right kind of cognitive faculties to acquire true beliefs about those things, then how do we know these things? So it's an epistemic argument that you run. And then it sounded like there was a second argument you kind of had buried in there, which is about moral motivation. So just because there are a bunch of moral facts out there, say God does not exist, why should I do lots of different kinds of moral actions? Because there's not any ultimate justice in the end. Everything just kind of unalives and becomes fertilizer. So I was trying to figure out like which of those 2 arguments were you wanting to run, or maybe you're just trying to do both. I was curious.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of my point. Is that if there is no afterlife, if there is no standard, if there is no punishment for doing evil, right? Why should I not go around and do whatever gives me the largest dopamine dump that I can possibly get for the short years that I'm on Earth before I die?
Okay, so it's the moral motivation sounds like the main one, and I think there you could say there's something to that, right? Like so like Michael Tooley, he's this atheist philosopher at Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder, and he'll say that like if God does not exist, then there are certain kinds of things that we lose, and one of those is any sort of sense of ultimate justice, which he admits undermines some of our moral motivations. He doesn't think it undermines all of them, but it would undermine some of our moral motivations, because you would have other kinds of reasons that you'd prefer to act on instead of maybe like some certain moral reasons. So there's at least one person who can concede at least part of what you're up to.
I guess I don't understand. I don't understand that, because that has a very that builds in to the concept of God a very specific like motivation, set of desires, intentions, characteristics that is not like yeah, you could make true of that in that like light if you stipulate within your story that or something like that. But like I don't know why it couldn't just like do some stalking horse kind of thing with I don't know, some like maybe like even non-naturalistic kind of moral realism or like Platonic notion, like something with abstract objects, right? It just seems like I don't really know what I'm getting out of the intention. Like we specify on the intentions or characteristics or motivations of a desire from some God or some hypothesis there, versus comparing that to removing the intentions but kind of baking the values in some other like I don't want to say dispositional account, but maybe it's like a Platonic account or something else.
So is the objection something like this? Since I don't know what God's reasons are for creating in general, or why this particular universe, therefore I can't go ahead and just stipulate this would, like, God would care about ultimate justice. Is it something like that?
Kind of, yeah. It's not. I'm kind of in the camp. It's not clear to me what a designer would expect unless you build in like with these auxiliary hypotheses about, like, if you build in the motivations and characteristics of that God, then of course you're going to get that outcome, right? I'm not saying like I also think that you can mirror this on like some type of naturalism, right? So I don't like. I'm kind of not saying that this is like. And me and you've talked about this. I feel like 6 or 7 months ago, but I don't expect you to remember. And I think me and you both agreed, because I brought this up as a problem, and you're like, well, I kind of agree. And I was like, well, look, I'm not trying to say this is like a theistic problem. This is like, I think like a naturalist, is not going to get these expectations the same way. But the point being is that like, it's clear that you get the expectations when you build in the desires and stuff, but it's not clear that you can do that unless you pull it out of thin cloth, right? Once you make that move, then it's clear. But I don't know why I couldn't kind of like malpass stalking horse the same kind of way that he does with like who's it, that Luke, I can't remember his name, but
Luke Barnes.
Yeah, like Luke, like how he does that with like the dispositions and desires. It's kind of like a similar move.
Yeah, so I've been working on my book on this topic. So like, because I talk a bit about it in my book Eternal in Love that just came out, but like I wanted to do like a full scale like investigation on this, like why would God create, and look at all the different models of God. And one of the things I'm noticing in the history of ideas here is when you're trying to posit some reason for why you think God might create, it needs to explain a lot of different phenomena. So the discussion about stalking horse is like really new, but there's something in the neighborhood that's quite old. So Moses Maimonides considers this one explanation, which says God created the entire universe just for the Messiah. And Maimonides is like, this universe is huge. And there's a whole lot of stuff in there that's completely unnecessary if the Messiah is the only goal, if that's the only goal. And so he's just like, this is an inadequate explanation because it needs to explain all this, the existence of all this other stuff. And I take that to be a pretty good point. So when you're looking at an explanation for why God might create, it needs to account for a lot of different phenomena. And so I guess back to Servant's point would be maybe something like this, or Michael Tooley's point. There's this intuition that we have that we want justice to be served. And this sort of like Kantian kind of intuition that if God exists, then there would be some sort of ultimate defeat of evil or some sort of ultimate justice in the end. And so part of the thing that needs to be explained is a whole bunch of these different kinds of moral intuitions.
Yeah, but wouldn't that just push the question back? Like, why does God view this thing as justice over another thing?
I don't think so. I mean, if it's an ultimate sense of justice, it would just be that's justice, end of story. It wouldn't be here's a couple different flavors of justice, and which one does God prefer?
Are you saying this is like based off some congruence of moral intuition? Because I'm not.
I think that's what the Kantian argument's supposed to be. I don't know if I always buy it, but that's the idea.
The political landscape just shows totally that that's not true, right?
Oh, well, I mean, okay, now the political landscape is going to be different, right? So there's another, I don't want to defend Kant. I can't stand the guy.
It's just one example of what I would
Yeah, but right. So here's the idea is there's justice, the concept of justice, and then there are conceptions of the best way to like divvy that out. And that's what you see in a lot of debates in politics, and well, politics is usually something else. In political philosophy, those are what the debates are supposed to be about, right? Is the best way to divvy out just like a conception of justice.
I should have specified to you I'll because you've told me to call you Ryan, but I just want to call you Dr. Mullins. That sounds cool by association. So Dr. Mullins. I mean more about.
Can you call me Mr. Jim while you're at it?
No, you can shut your mouth and just continue to be pretty, Jim. That's what you can do. No, I'm just kidding. I love you. No, I guess I should have specified that. Like, I just mean like maybe like lay people or like the general kind of public, the voting public or something like that. I mean, it's not like I don't know. It's the best example to use. I don't know. Maybe I could just grant them like intuition or something and like shared nature of agents or something, human agents. But I guess I never have understood why. It's like it seems to be in the same vein of like what realists say about, like how people use the language or like when they conduct these studies that people are typically realists or something. I don't buy into that at all. I think that that's like mistaken. So I'm kind of like a Bushian, like a Lance Bushian, if that makes sense on those kind of issues.
I guess I'm just not understanding the view. So this is a question I guess I had for you earlier, was when you were talking to Servant about moral realism, and you kept bringing in truth makers. I was a bit confused on this discussion because these are different.
God, can you guys shut the fuck up? Jesus. This is the most... Jesus.
All right, sorry about that.
Imagine.
Go ahead.
Very TikTok expected.
Sorry, go ahead.
It might actually be boring, but me and Ryan like it, so who cares?
So yeah, if you could just clarify the difference what you're thinking between.
Yeah, so I was. Yeah. So yeah, let me be transparent with you. What I was attempting to do was render an argument. So I've had like email correspondence with Dr. Oppie, and then he's even mentioned in some AMA I can link you to. I can find it. Or it's not an AMA. It was like an interview that he did, where he was kind of pressed on his view of realism. And the way that look, I'm not a realist, so I'm kind of like Lance Bush, where I think typically it's going to fall into one of three categories, where it's going to be some like Sam Harris view that's like trivial. You're going to point out some like descriptive fact that seems compatible with like most metaethical views, so it doesn't seem to be, very advantageous for you to adopt. Or it's going to be like something false, where maybe someone's saying that, like, example, if I'm an atheist and I don't think God exists, but they think there's some moral fact and God's desires or whatever makes that true, well, then I'm going to think that moral proposition is just false because I don't think God exists, right? So, so it'll end up in that category. But typically what I think, especially with like atheists that are more realists that I talk to, and this isn't like unique to me, this is just kind of parroting Lance, is that it'll fall into this category, which I find the most, of just like unintelligible, where it's not even clear that it's in the category of having some doxastic attitude towards, because it's not even clear it's propositional, right? It's like telling me that somebody is taller without that referential notion built into it, that they're taller than something else. The analogy would just be that if this like reason talk is divorced from like desires or stances of agents, that it seems like as intelligible as divorcing taller from a referential notion and just being like, well, Jim's taller, but he's not taller than he was last week or taller than Bill. He's just taller, right? It sounds like that concept of taller is like opaque, the same way that what I think realists are talking about seems to be like an opaque concept.
So it's either trivial, unintelligible, and what was the third one?
Or unremarkable.
Just false.
Predicated on like some belief that I have like independent reason I think is false.
Yeah, so when I entered the chat, like it said, don't insult anyone or you'll get kicked. And I found that intelligible. So intelligible that I was really tempted to make some like sarcastic comments about it and go, but what if my insult's really funny? And so I'm like, that's pretty intelligible. And then when I like, and then when I like I don't teach school children anymore, when I tell them like, don't kick Johnny over there, it's not good. They find it intelligible. So I don't understand what's unintelligible about it.
Are you interpreting that in because I don't interpret that in like a realist sense.
Well, I'm still not clear what you mean by realist, because because that's where it gets to the trivial issue.
Stance into I guess the way that the way that it's been expressed is that it's like stance independent reasons or obligations.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one flavor of it. So there's this guy named Fenley. I forget his first name. He's got this nice little paper in Philosophy Compass called The Four Faces of Moral Realism. And so it's a nice short, 10-page paper that gives you 4 different kinds of claims you'll see from moral realists. And so stance independence is usually one that everyone wants. But the way you get that is usually that's where realists are usually going to want to add more content. But there's a lot of people who are realists who say you might have someone who's a constructivist. Yeah. So you construct moral facts out of human nature. And so you've got an explanation for where the stance independence comes from, but it's still a realist position because you've got these actual moral facts that are out there.
Yeah, I just don't know what whatever flavor it is. If someone says I know what stance independence is. I can hold up my controller I'm playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater on and be like, well, it doesn't matter if I close my eyes and put my fingers in my ears and go blah blah. It's not there. It's stance independently. There's a controller there. But when you talk about reason talk, what I take is built into that concept is stances or preferences, right, that agents have. And so when you make this move about stance independent reasons, so if I asked you, if I said that Jim was taller and you said taller than he was last week, and I said no, and you go taller than Bill, and I go no, he's not taller than anything, he's just taller. Do you understand? Could you conceive of what I'm talking about there? This isn't a knockdown defeater for realism or something.
No, I think I understand that point now finally, because
that's kind of what that's my headspace when I talk to realists is there's no longer this tethering to agent stances, right? They're untethered, and I don't know what that even means anymore. It's foreign to me.
I see. Okay, which is actually quite common in moral philosophy to say these kind of things. So a lot of times people will. So John Duns Scotus, he has this example where he says the basic fundamental moral facts of reality, they by themselves are not action guiding. They can't be. It's just not what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to be action guiding. They're so thin that they wouldn't fill out the 10 Commandments. So in order to be action guiding, you have to take fundamental moral facts and combine them with non-moral facts in the world or in your circumstance. And so that's where a lot of what you're interested in, which is which kind of things should I, as this particular agent, with these commitments, with these promises, these this network of responsibilities, what should I do in this circumstance? And so the realist, a realist could say yeah, great, cool. So now you're starting to add in all sorts of other relevant, non-moral facts, and maybe some really thick, detailed moral facts into the situation.
Do you mean
to guide action?
You mean sorry, I mean to interrupt. I'm just trying to understand. Do you mean assessing a normative ethical framework or something? Because I think that's not going to be it's not like you have to depend on realism there or something. I could be a oncologist or something. And just,
correct.
Yeah.
But so this, so the moral realist is just saying, I'm just giving you a metaphysical story, maybe an epistemological story too. What you should do in your day-to-day life, that's not my job. That's the job of the normative ethics, ethicist, and I don't do that. So that's
kind of, my brain's horrible, but so I'm losing track of the initial conversation.
It's all right.
The other person. But no, it's just I always love talking with you, Ryan. But I think that's kind of seems like the issue. I think Joe and a lot of people have pointed this out is that people are conflating some normative ethical thing where it's the thing that they think that an atheist can't do is have this because someone could just be an anti-realist and have some look, I'm a threshold deontologist or something and have some normative ethical framework or whatever, and tell them what they should or should not do in that. Now, if you want to get into the meta-ethical framework, it's not clear what you have as a burden is you're going to have to show some incompatibility with God's non-existence and there being stance-independent moral facts. It's what I was trying to do with them is say well, if I can grant that they're propositional, which I'm hesitant to do. If I grant that they are, I try to play my best, like, atheist, realist faced. It's not clear that being an atheist and God's non-existence is, like, incompatible. It seemed was saying. So I guess more to the point, like, you would assent to that, though. You would assent that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have, like, certain theological views or something that gets in the way of it. I don't know. I don't know.
I go back and forth in my own mind about whether or not to be a Platonist about abstracta, or just shove it all into the mind of God, because I feel like Platonism has a lot of explanatory power by itself. I don't think it can explain everything, but it does a lot. So like Eric Wielenberg's like atheistic, like, Platonic realism about morality and neither are necessary truths. I'm like, yeah, it seems pretty good to me.
Doesn't Felipe Leon have, like, something like that as well? Something.
I think he does, but I've not read as much of him on that, because Wielenberg's like, he's like such an epic figure in these debates, and I also don't do that much moral philosophy anymore.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm horrible with moral philosophy, to be honest. But, like, would you assent to? I guess I just ask more, like, bluntly. Would you assent that realism is compatible with God's non-existence, or I don't know? Maybe feel free to go. Hey, you're putting me on the spot, and I'm not. I don't want to.
No. I think so. Yeah. If I'm willing to concede that, like, that God does not necessarily exist.
Or maybe I ask you if it's conceivable, but not give you, like, conceivability, like, entailments that it means something, like, it's just maybe epistemic conceivability or something like that.
And then yes, because Wielenberg's Platonic, like, atheistic Platonic realism I take to be a live option. I really do.
Okay, that's interesting. I know that you and Joe have said don't wield the aloneness argument in a negative way, but I think I have against classical theists, so I apologize.
Well, that's just something Joe says to be nice.
I'm just like, be non-classical theist. Look, I'm an atheist, don't you know?
Just so everybody knows, I have the clip of Ryan saying that God necessarily doesn't exist. So
that's great. Yeah, I gotta do that to Ryan. I gotta, like, have a conversation and, like, out of context clip them and just, here we go, boys, pack it up. Theism's done.
Does anybody have the...
Make some really cringy YouTube video with cheesy thumbnails or something.
Does anybody have the clip of servants saying when we die we're going to be fertilizer, or when we're unalived?
I don't think we have enough clips of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just don't. I don't know. I guess I don't know why I put my hat in that. I'm an anti-realist, but I just feel the need to be like, I don't think realism on whatever view is like, even propositional. It's just not clear to me that it is. Like, what I mean by me being an anti-realist is I just deny that there are stance-independent moral facts. But I don't know why I throw my hat in for the realist, but it's just, I guess I'm like, if I try to I do this thing where I go, well, the best that I can understand it is, I think about, like, I live in some society and there's, like, laws that I might not agree with, or maybe, like, smoking shweed or something like that. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's like, oh, well, there's this, like, obligation beyond me. And then let's, like, say that, like, it's like, damn, I really want to smoke it, but, no, I won't do it because it's, even though I desire to do it, it's against the law and I shouldn't. And, like, that's when I do that, I'm like, okay, that's the best I can do. But then when I go under the hood, it's very clear why that's problematic. Namely that one of the stance-independent obligations we could point out, which is the reason why I want to do that, is that I probably don't want to go to jail, or, like, I don't want to, break the law for some reason. And so that's going to be some overriding reason of why I don't do that. So it's not really that I am in accord with some stance-independent reason. It's that under the hood, I have some overriding reasons on why I don't smoke the weed, right? Which is that I want to follow the law or whatever. But then also, the law itself just will funnel down to some, like, lobbyists and legislators or something, or governors or whatever. So they'll be stance-dependent themselves. So, like, even when I try to do this, when I think, do I have obligations that I live up to despite the fact that I don't really agree with them, it turns out that there's some overriding reason that is the reason why I'm doing that. Or, better yet, if we just ignore that, those things are just stance dependent to begin with. So it doesn't seem like there's, any carving out the space for realism. For me, to try to do my bet, that's not a defeat for realism or anything. That's just putting my head space there. I think that I do it, and then I realize that I really can't do this.
Well, maybe this is like a stupid thing to say, and I realize I could say stupid things, but it seems to me that, like, whether it's like realist or anti-realist, that like this notion of like goodness, right, or this concept of like when I see something or an action, right, that is like good, that I would deem good, that this notion of goodness always seems to boil down to some kind of like serving some kind of desire, right? Or some kind of, whether that's indexed to the person or God, right? At this point, it seems to always be like a servant, like sort of a servant notion to me. And people can justify that in many ways. I guess I'm just...
Well, I don't know that I was sent to the servant thing, but like I know what you're saying. Like, yeah,
it serves an end, is what I'm trying to say.
You could replace desire talk with like good talk. And so if someone wants to say something like, did the Schnazis, what they do was wrong or something, like index to me, yes. But if you're asking like what they did was good, and what you mean by that was, did the Schnazis desire to do that? Well, yes, they did. And those aren't semantics that you're going to disagree with. You're going to agree with me. It's going to be really clear once we go through the dialectic that like you don't have this kind of one up on me to go, well, they thought it was good, and like, there's no truth of the it's like, well, look, my view is stipulating that there isn't an objective fact of the matter. That's the thing that I'm denying. It's not like you can hold that against me, right? That's what I think the discourse is. That's what I think is happening in our world.
It just seems that like almost every worldview, when it comes to like metaethics in this sense, like just boils down to some kind of utilitarianism. Like it's serving some kind of end. That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't know. I can't make...
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm merely just like, that's just like me just listening. I've been a silent observer. It always just kind of seems to boil down to it.
That's fair. The reason why I stick out of a lot of these conversations, or at least recently, is that I've realized the amount of like empirical, like embedded empirical, maybe Ryan might agree or not, but it seems like there's a lot of embedded empirical claims that people make about like the folk kind of use of moral talk and stuff like that. And I am just not ready to assent. I can tell people what I mean by the language, but I won't make empirical claims about that. I can tell you, if someone puts a gun to my head and go, give me like, hey, do you think, tell me what you think. It's like, okay, well, I can tell you, I think people like I don't think people are having like dispositional accounts. I think they think it's normative. And that was a fact of the matter, whether or not like normative realism is true or something. Maybe it's like really dispositional. I don't know. But yeah, like I can tell you what I think people think. I think when people say, oh, I made a mistake, that they're like, oh, I should not have done that. Right? I think that's what they're doing. But I'm also not one to extend that to cultures that don't share the same language as me. I have no idea how they perceive moral facts. So, I don't know if Ryan agrees with me here, but I think people maybe underestimate the embedded empirical claims that go here, and I'm just not willing to take them on.
I guess I will disagree, because a lot of the research I've done on emotions, there's all these different studies on just the different categories to capture emotions and to capture a lot of the value claims underneath them. And there's this one meta study I read a few years ago, and it created all these different clusters of different kinds of emotions and values that were at play in all these different languages. I think it was like 25, 26 different languages. And you could do one of those Wordle things, where like certain words are bigger than others, but like all the same concepts were there. And then when you look at different kinds of arguments for like moral realism or anti-realism, say like in Indian philosophy or Eastern religions, the debates are very similar to what we have in the West. Like they're not that different.
I think that if you surveyed them, because the one if you surveyed, this is why I hold to Lance Bush's view. If you surveyed these people look, I haven't taken a class in philosophy. I like philosophy, but I didn't think about moral facts or this kind of space of metaethics the way that I did when I had no idea of philosophy, right? So it's very clear to me that the folk do not think in the way that we do, or if we do, it's really hard to make that. I'm worried that if you survey people, that it's not clear, like, whether they're answering it some meta-ethical way or some normative ethical way, right? Whether they're shifting, whether they understand the question, if they understand realism, right? Because I think a lot of realists want to say that if you survey people, like, people typically turn out to be like realists, but that's not clear to me. And Lance has pointed out there's a lot of like methodological issues. I can't relay those, and I'd regret even trying to if it's not my domain. So I don't know. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. I have no idea to assess that. But assuming the conditional that it is true, I worry about, like how you get underneath that language, because it seems like the folk definitely aren't going to think about moral dilemmas or like real, like, I don't know. It was hard. I remember it being very hard for me to even understand subjectivism versus like the way that I would phrase it, objectivism versus subjectivism, right? Like, it would just be hard to part, like, even when someone says stance independent or mind independent, like, those terms were weird to me, right? It was like learning a new song on guitar, to get it down. So I just worry about that kind of, I don't want to call it indoctrination, but I will, like, indoctrination into philosophical language.
No, I think that's a fair worry, because I have the same experience with a lot of different areas of philosophy where you start learning all the vocabulary and it's like learning a new language, and then it takes you years of studying it before you can kind of get back to, oh right, what were the intuitions I had and that other people had that started me down this path. And so on some topics, I feel very confident to go, okay, these were the intuitions that people were having. Okay, my gosh, I feel like I got very far away from that. What moral philosophers are usually trying to do is start with those moments where you have this kind of intuition of like, this is right and this is wrong, and then you reach a conflict and you're like, oh goodness, hang on, I'm not being consistent here. And then you like kind of start going from there. That's what they're wanting to do. How successful they are, I don't know, because I think you're right. I think if I did ask some of like this meta study on all these different languages and the values at play, I'd be like, so now are you guys being like constructivists here? Are you being like consequentialists? Or are you being, they'd be like, we're just social psychologists. We don't know and we don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's where I'm like, so I brought up a lot of stuff, and maybe I got off your initial point, but like, did what I say about the surveying and the empirical kind of questions, like, in my skepticism there, it's like, is that related to what you were saying at all, or did I?
Kind of, yeah. All these different studies do. So just the studies, and then I'll go back to what I see in Eastern philosophy.
Yeah, I just don't want to take you off your point.
Because these are two separate points. So all these studies really show is that people have some kind of baseline understanding of like, that's right, that's wrong. Is it consistent? No, that's not what we're looking for. Do they have some kind of concept of that's right and that's wrong? And do they have a bunch of different phrases and words and things that they use to try to capture the rightness and wrongness of lots of different actions? And the answer is usually yes. They've got a whole network of things to try to capture that. And so that's all pre-theoretical. It's not very philosophical. That's fine. Because that's the phenomena that I think a meta-ethicist or a moral philosopher is wanting to try to get at. So what I see in debates in Eastern religions and Western religions and all these different philosophical traditions is they start with that, and then they come up with these concepts and these ethical theories that look very similar to what we have in the West. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So there's this global like phenomena of humans of starting with these baseline moral assumptions that are pre-theoretical, and then when they start theorizing, a certain number of theories pop up and debates ensue, and those same kind of debates are the ones that you and I are having. And so I'm like, okay, so whatever they're doing in these other cultures and stuff is not radically different from what we're up to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you what's right or wrong. It's just saying they're not that different.
Yeah. I couldn't even pretend to like get into all that. But no, sorry. I guess we got taken off. And that guy left, right? Already.
Oh, he left like ages ago.
Yeah, he left a long
Hey,
time.
Ryan, I have a question. You mentioned.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, change the topic for us.
Hey, Ryan, can you hear me? I had a question. You said you had a tendency or leaning towards Platonic values a little bit. Would that be like necessary abstract is separate from God, or sort of a divine conceptualism in God's mind. The whole Eric Wielenberg thing seems a little bit, I don't know, a little bit hard to grasp. The instantiation, the concrete world, a moment of love or something reaching across to the abstract world. I was just could you elaborate on that a little bit and what your thoughts were?
Yeah, I can't elaborate on the Wheelenberg point because I just don't think abstract objects can reach. I don't know what that means. But yeah, I can elaborate on the first question though. So I do go back in my mind, back and forth between two different views. So one is you've got God plus a bunch of Platonic stuff. So propositions and abstracto. And then the other view would be you've got all the things that you would want to say are in the Platonic realm, so all the propositions and whatnot. You just say they're divine ideas. They're just ideas that God necessarily has. And these are two different views that I go back and forth on.
And there's no worry about them. I think Craig gets excited about there being all these necessary abstracta, where God would be alone in the beginning or something like that, or eternally. Is that an issue at all for you?
So Craig's argument is supposed to go something like this. If you have these Platonic forms, say like, let's just stick it with a simple proposition like 2 + 2 = 4, and say that proposition exists independent of God. So it's uncreated, nothing caused it to exist, it's just there, and God's there, both of them just hanging out. Craig's like, oh gosh, if that's true, then God would not have aseity. And I want to go, how did we get there? And when I look at the definition of aseity that he uses in his different writings, there's an idea that keeps getting snuck into the concept of aseity that I don't think belongs there. So aseity just means like self-existence, or to be more precise, like an object exists ase if and only if its existence is not dependent upon or like asymmetrically derived from something outside of itself. So God's like independent. And so God would be ase, and 2 + 2 = 4, this proposition just floating out there that God didn't create or cause or anything. And you're like, okay, well, you just got 2 ase things. Okay, what's the problem? Here's what Craig does, is I've noticed, and he's not the only one. A lot of people do this. They sneak in this other claim where God is, in order to be ase, also has to be like the creator of everything else that's not God. And I'm like, well, now that's a different statement. That's not ase anymore. That's a different thesis.
Yeah. I was gonna say I might actually even exist with aseity, but then I was more like, it seems that like what people want to say. I mean, I don't know if I get this wrong though, but like, it seems what's important to most theists I talk to is that there's this mind that exists alone and explains like why there's this external world, right? So it seems to assume some type of content internalism or something where the content in God's mind is furnished there. And the reason why like it's hard for me to even visualize theism where God finds himself in a world with like whatever, even if there's no Platonic objects, it just finds himself in some world. Is that like, if I went, like, for one thing is if I compared my view with you, it's like, you're going to have things in your view that aren't explained by God, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Aren't explained by God, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so, like, one worry is, like, there's a dialectic, at least maybe this is just a TikTok kind of dialectic, is that, like, how do you explain this thing if not God? But that goes out the window, and you already now have